Thanks very much. I've got some slides, which hopefully, I do that, Mike? Oh yeah, here we go, great. So thanks very much. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk to you today. I'm keenly aware of my position as the person who's potentially holding you back from lunch, so I will try and get through this as quickly as I can. That said, I'm dosed up on Lemsip, so there's a non-zero possibility of me going off on a psychedelic ramble halfway through the talk, but I'll try and avoid that if I possibly can. So I'm here to talk to you about an initiative from the Law Society, which is an ethical practice framework for in-house solicitors. So I've been really interested to hear about some of the regulatory approaches that are being proposed. This is a slightly different approach. It's supposed to be complementary to regulation, but it's a different way of trying to raise ethical standards within the profession. So I'll tell you a bit about it. But first, who am I? I'm a philosopher. I'm based at the University of Leeds. So I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a legal academic. I'm an ethicist who's interested in professional ethics. I work at a centre called IDEA, the Ethics Centre. We are a bunch of academics who are interested in practical ethical problems. And we try to help students and people in the wider world to get to grips with those problems. And I work as a consultant, and I lead a small ethical consultancy team within the centre. We were commissioned about a year ago by the Law Society to produce an ethical practice framework for in-house solicitors. Why in-house solicitors particularly? Well, I suppose the simple answer to that question is that the Law Society's consultation of its members through the Changing Ethical Landscapes initiative revealed that there was a need for some attention to be paid to in-house solicitors specifically. But why is that the case? Well, firstly, it's a growing segment of the profession, 26% and getting bigger as a proportion of the overall profession, and relatively under-examined, right? So the ethics of in-house law, I think, has had a lot less attention than the ethics of private practice law. In-house lawyers are potentially quite exposed and quite vulnerable in various ways, so they might well be under pressure to cut corners or to kind of turn a blind eye to practices which are ethically or legally questionable. But they're also potentially in a position where they're blamed when things go wrong. And in-house ethics is kind of complex, right? So ethics generally, I think, is complex, but in-house ethics in particular. So to think, for example, about independence for in-house lawyers, it's a complex set of questions, right? What does it mean to be independent as an in-house lawyer? What does it mean when you are employed by your client and are therefore, in a sense, part of your client? What does it mean to be independent? Should we just abandon the idea of independence, or do we need to reconceptualize independence for in-house lawyers? So it's complex, it's difficult. These questions aren't straightforward, but that's also why it's interesting. What did we do? We carried out 3 rounds of research. We did a survey, which went out to the whole of the Law Society's in-house membership. We did some expert interviews with solicitors who could be expected to have a kind of overview of the ethical issues in play. And then we did some further interviews and focus groups where we got into the detail of the issues. We had a scoping phase where we worked out what the framework should look like, and then we had a development phase where we actually drafted these materials. So what is it? Well, firstly, it's not regulation, right? So this is not trying to tell solicitors what they are ethically required to do or ethically required not to do. It's intended to be complementary to the SRA's regulation and also its guidance, which it's recently released, which is aimed at in-house solicitors. The idea is to put solicitors in a position where they're better able to do what's ethically required of them, to meet their ethical challenges. And one way of summing that up is as balancing influence and independence, right? So the solicitor has to have influence within the organisation in order to help the organisation to manage legal and ethical risk, which is part of their role. But they also have to have independence. Again, in some sense, to ensure that they can actually provide a challenging voice within organisations, right? So it's no good having influence if you're not able to deliver news which might be unwelcome to people or provide challenge. And we've developed materials which offer support to in-house solicitors on 3 levels. So the first level is individual understanding and skill. So we have a module in there around ethical decision making, offering people some tools to help them get better at making ethical decisions. We have a module about how to positively influence the culture of the organisation that you're working in. We have some interactive scenarios which help people to kind of flex their ethical reasoning skills and think through difficult situations which might bring into play various different principles and require them to make complex judgments and balance different considerations and so on. The second level is strengthening the position of in-house solicitors in organisations. So when we went out to consultation, when we did the research which fed into the framework, one of the clear messages that we were getting from in-house solicitors is that there was a need for materials which put them on a stronger footing within the organisation in which they're working. So in that regard, we've developed something called a protocol for employing organisations, which is a document which the solicitor can present to the board or whatever the equivalent governance kind of entity is within the organisation, which kind of clarifies what the role entails, what you can and can't ask of solicitors, and what support is required from the organisation to enable the in-house solicitor to perform their role in terms of things like resourcing, reporting lines, things like that. And there are a few other documents like that as well. There's a contract amendment letter, which solicitors can use to request to have their employment contract amended to reflect their status as regulated individuals. And there's a template job description for in-house solicitors as well. And then there's also an element to it which is about fostering professional solidarity, so solidarity within the wider profession, creating networks of in-house solicitors so that people can go to people who may have faced similar situations and get advice from people. So a real need to have these kind of informal networks. So we're pointing solicitors towards networks which already exist and encouraging them to create their own networks. Okay, so what's happening now? Unfortunately, I don't have the date of the launch yet. I was hoping to have a date to be able to tell you today, but it's TBC. But it will be this spring, and we're going to launch it in a beta consultation phase for I think about 3 months. So there will be an opportunity for people to look through the materials, practice applying them, try to make sense of them, and give us some feedback on them. And then that will be reflected in a final version, which will then be released. So. As I say, we don't have the date of the launch yet, but if you use that QR code, that'll take you to the Law Society's website and enable you to register to be kept informed about professional ethics initiatives from the Law Society, including this framework. So that's how to be kept up to date on this. Or come and find me at lunch or get in touch with me on that email address. I think there might be time for a couple of questions if anybody has anything that they wanted to ask. Yes, go on.
Sorry, thank you. The toolkit where you've got, I think the idea of mentoring and building capability is wonderful, but there's an element in that which assumes that when you go to someone more senior in in-house counsel, that their ethics are going to be good and that they're going to be mentoring in a way that is ethical. And I flag the material, and I'm sure you're across it, by Dr. Vivian Holmes, who's done a lot of work on in-house counsel and ethical obligations or none. But I guess the issue that's really troubling me is what about the personal ethics of the lawyer who sends the slap letter and the personal ethics of the individual? It just seems to me that it's not all about the regulator and the regulator regulating. What about internal regulation of you as a lawyer who is supposed to uphold the law and be on about the rule of law and the public interest and all the other things that are in the statutory obligations? We do discuss in our report on access to justice the reductionist arguments around best interests of the client, which often rule over all of the other things that are in the statutory obligations. And we argue around paramountcy of some higher duties, perhaps, and that might require legislative reform. However, the thing that I just am struggling with in this conversation, there was such an eloquent and horrible experience that you had with the care sector. So thank you for sharing with that earlier, and also as a self-represented litigant. I think isn't there also, and maybe this is what Richard's Orpin's survey will do and inquiry will do, but isn't there a fundamental ethical radar of values and good conduct that should exist, and how can your research reinforce the actual thing about the lawyer being ethical themselves and making those judgments themselves? I know about corporate culture and all of that, and I acknowledge all that, and in-house counsel as Vivian Holmes's work, but what about the responsibility of each of us as practising lawyers or regulated people to actually do what's ethical? That's my question. That's why I'm uneasy about some of the conversations, because I think it's about lawyers not blaming it on the regulator, but actually thinking about their own practice and what they should and shouldn't be doing, and actually having a counselling role with their client to say why it might not be in the client's best interest to do the slap letter, and actually taking their internal ethical obligation more seriously. That's what's troubling me about this conversation. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I mean, clearly it is, whoever else's responsibility is, it clearly is the responsibility of the individual to make ethical decisions, to act in good faith, right? There's no argument about that. But the question becomes then, what can you do about people who aren't acting in that way? And one answer is regulation, right? So if there's kind of clear consequences when you act against your ethical requirements, then that's one thing which influences people to do the right thing. I think so the approach that we took was to kind of not start from the assumption that lawyers are badly motivated, right? So we kind of started from the assumption that most lawyers go into work wanting to do the right thing, right? And that there are various kind of pressures, temptations, difficulties that they can run into within organisations which can kind of lead them away from acting in that way. And we were trying to, to the best of our ability, kind of, remove some of those pressures or put lawyers in a better position to resist those pressures. So to take one example from what you said, the kind of excuses that are made about, acting in the client's interest. Now, clearly, there is a professional responsibility to act in the client's best interest, but equally clearly, that's not an absolute responsibility, and the SRA principles are completely clear that where that conflicts with a professional duty which is there to safeguard the public interest, that takes precedence, right? So there are kind of reminders about that within the materials that we developed. But what we're trying to do, and again, it's supposed to be complementary with regulatory approaches, right? So it's kind of working on a slightly different level, but we are trying to put solicitors in a situation where they feel empowered to resist that kind of thing, right? And to say, I know this is in the business's interest. I know you're telling me that I need to do this because it's good for the business, but there are other reasons why we can't do that. And to be in a stronger position to have those conversations. Sorry.
Would you win your unfair dismissal if you stick to your ethical guns and your employer doesn't like it? Actually finds another hired gun who will do what they say.
Well, one thing that might help in that respect is the contract amendment letter that we've put in there. So that recognises explicitly that you're a regulated individual. So if you are then asked to do something which is against your professional obligations, then the person asking you is then kind of potentially in breach of that employment contract. So, yeah, there's things we're trying to do. Yes.
Using lawyer as a generic term.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be officers of the
Yes.
Fundamentally, all lawyers, whether they are solicitors, whatever this click CR, whatever it's called is, or barristers, they're all supposed to be officers of the court. So when they tell lies or go away from the truth, they're misleading, they're knowingly, let's use you lot's language, they're knowingly misleading the court.
Yeah.
And that happens time and time and time again. So when you're talking about all these things that you're doing, at the forefront, I think lawyers, again, back to the generic term, need to be reminded that primarily they are officers of the court.
Yeah, and again, that's a phrase that is definitely used within our materials. I mean, just I think that's probably going to be the last question, unfortunately, because we need to let everybody get to lunch. But come and find me at lunch. Yeah, I mean, so my position as somebody who's interested in professional ethics is that all professionals have two sets of duties. They have duties to the client and they have duties to the public. And those duties to the public are overriding. And that's the case with lawyers, it's the case with other professionals as well, right? And one way in which duties to the public come out for lawyers is exactly as that, yeah, as you say, they're officers of the court. So, yeah, completely agree.
Thank you very much, Tim.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.